He ruled the world through fury. His armies crushed kingdoms. His voice silenced ministers. His rage could make grown men tremble. But in this room, one man didn't move. While Napoleon Bonaparte shouted, cursed, and tore through the silence, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand stood perfectly still. The emperor called him a coward, a traitor, and in what would become his famous insult, he spat the words,
"A thief! A man without faith! You're nothing but shit in a silk stocking!"
And yet, he couldn't get rid of him, because he needed him. Talleyrand was the mind that made the empire look civilized, the calm behind the chaos, the mask that made tyranny sound like diplomacy. He would serve kings, betray emperors, and survive them all. This is how one man outsmarted the most powerful empire on earth and led to the downfall of Napoleon Bonaparte. Before Napoleon ruled the world, France was in ruins. Revolution had torn the country apart, kings executed, priests exiled, nobles hunted, and somewhere among those ruins waited a man who could adapt to anything. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, born an aristocrat, once a bishop of the church, had survived by shedding his skin. When the monarchy fell, he served the revolution. When the revolution turned to terror, he disappeared. And when the smoke cleared, he returned, untouched, indispensable, and ready for the next ruler. In 1799, Napoleon seized power. A soldier with no royal blood, no legitimacy, only brilliance and ambition. But he needed someone who could make his rule look respectable. Someone who spoke the language of kings and courtiers. That man was Talleyrand. He became Napoleon's foreign minister. He built alliances, negotiated peace with Britain and Austria, and convinced Europe that France's revolution had become civilization again. Napoleon conquered with cannons. Talleyrand conquered with charm. Together, they rebuilt France's image, the soldier and the statesman, power and polish. But beneath the civility, a fracture was already forming. Because Talleyrand didn't believe in empires built on fury, and Napoleon couldn't stand a man he couldn't control. For a time, they were unstoppable. Napoleon's armies swept through Europe. Austerlitz, Jena, Friedland, victory after victory. His name became legend, his crown inevitable. And beside him stood the charming diplomat who made war look like order. But behind those victories, Talleyrand saw ruin approaching. After Austerlitz, as the emperor basked in glory, he whispered,
"One more such victory, and we are ruined."
Napoleon heard weakness. Talleyrand meant prophecy. From that moment, their alliance began to crack. The emperor mocked him in public, called him faithless, yet couldn't rule without his mind. So Talleyrand withdrew into silence. He knew the greatest advantage is to be underestimated. The man who seems harmless is the one no one guards against. And as Napoleon's star blazed across Europe, Talleyrand made himself invisible. And in that invisibility began his quiet war. As Napoleon's armies thundered across Europe, Talleyrand began to weave his quiet web. He'd seen enough to know the emperor's ambition had no limits, and that unlimited power always ends the same way. So he prepared for what came after. Behind Napoleon's back, he opened secret lines of communication with Austria's foreign minister, Metternich, and with Tsar Alexander I of Russia, two men who feared Napoleon's growing empire. Through couriers and coded letters, Talleyrand assured them that France was not their enemy, only Bonaparte. That when the time came, they would find an ally inside the empire itself. In Paris, he played the loyal servant, calm, courteous, forgettable. But every hesitation, every softened message, every lost letter was part of his quiet rebellion. His goal was simple: isolate Napoleon, surround him with flattery, and let arrogance do the rest. It worked. The louder Napoleon became, the deeper Talleyrand sank into silence. And beneath that silence, the empire's undoing had already begun. The storm Talleyrand had foreseen finally came. In 1808, Napoleon invaded Spain, a campaign that spiraled into years of rebellion and guerrilla war. What he called a simple occupation became a wound that bled the empire dry. Then, in 1812, came Russia. 600,000 men marching east in summer, and only a shadow of them returning from the snow. The greatest army in Europe was destroyed not by battle, but by arrogance. By 1813, the nations Napoleon once humiliated, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, united against him. The empire began to fracture, and in the center of the collapse stood the one man who had seen it coming from the start. When the Allies reached Paris in 1814, Talleyrand moved first. He met them in secret, persuading them that France was not their enemy, only Bonaparte. On April 6, 1814, Napoleon abdicated. The empire was gone. And as the victors entered Paris, it wasn't a general who greeted them. It was Talleyrand himself, standing in the doorway of his mansion, already rewriting France's future. He negotiated peace, restored the Bourbon monarchy, and transformed France's defeat into his own triumph. Months later, at the Congress of Vienna, 1814 to 1815, the kings of Europe gathered to divide the spoils of war, and sitting among them was the man they once sought to destroy. Talleyrand convinced them to restore France's dignity, not through threats, but through patience, persuasion, and masterful manipulation. The man who had served kings, betrayed emperors, and outlived them all ended the game exactly where he always intended. Seated at the table, quietly shaping the world in his favor. He never needed an army. He made others fight for positions he'd already won. While men battled for crowns, Talleyrand learned to control the throne from the shadows. In the great chessboard of power, he was never the king, never the knight. He was the hand that moved them,